Final Fantasy is more than a collection of video games. It's a tapestry of evolving artistry, pioneering gameplay, and unforgettable stories that have left an indelible mark on the gaming industry and pop culture. From the release of Final Fantasy in 1987 to its status as a juggernaut of modern entertainment, the Final Fantasy series reflects not only the story of its characters, but also the story of the company that birthed it, the industry it reinvented, and the fans who have cherished it for decades. 38 years later, the legacy of Final Fantasy inspired collaborations that bridged genres and fan communities. One of the most anticipated crossovers in that partnership between Final Fantasy was with Magic. This collaboration brings together aspects of fantasy adventure games and strategic card games, reimagining well-known characters, skills, and villains in a refreshing setting. It also attracted many new players to Magic the Gathering, inspiring people to join the fan community and encouraging competitive ambition. One individual went from never playing to inspiring to become a Magic the Gathering world champion. This documentary, it's been created to highlight that journey, contribute to the broader fan community, and to share stories of individuals who are actively involved in this endeavor. This is Untapped Potential. This documentary is about my journey into Magic the Gathering, from beginner to world champion. Maybe. Hopefully. However, it was with Final Fantasy that initially sparked my interest in Magic, serving as my introduction to the game. So, for that reason, I've chosen to begin my documentary with that formative experience. Once upon a time, in 1987, a little game called Final Fantasy saved a company from doom, and it set off a magical explosion of swords, crystals, and chocobo feathers that haven't stopped since. The name, Final Fantasy, came about because the studio Square was in trouble. It truly was their last shot. But, with the Warriors of Light, turn-based battles, and pixelated dragons, the game was a hit, and Square, they survived to tell the tale. The sequels kept the magic rolling. Final Fantasy 2 and 3, they gave us new ways to level up and swap jobs, while Final Fantasy 4 introduced the active turn battle. 6 brought us Kefka, the crackling villain everyone loves to hate, and the stories that tugged at our heartstrings. Fun fact, the West got the numbers all mixed up, so don't be surprised if you see 2 as 4 or swapped around vice versa. Then came Final Fantasy 7. Cloud, giant swords, and a villain with silver hair stole the hearts and wallets in 1997. It brought 3D graphics, unforgettable moments, and it sold over 13 million copies. While Final Fantasy 8 and 9 continued the adventure with love stories and a return to the fairy tale roots. But then, history was made. The PlayStation 2 era. With the dawn of the new millennium, Final Fantasy leapt onto the PlayStation 2, one of the most successful gaming consoles ever, selling over 155 million units worldwide. This era brought forth Final Fantasy X in 2001. It dazzled fans with fully voiced characters, lush 3D worlds, and a heartfelt tale set in the world of Spira. The game, it became an instant classic, selling more than 8.5 million copies across all platforms and becoming a pivotal moment that the franchise has embraced with new technology and storytelling depth. Tidus, Yuna, and her pilgrimage would become icons, while the innovative sphere grid system and the emotional blitzball matches left lasting impressions on players around the globe. Final Fantasy XI let us party up online, and Final Fantasy XII let us program our own heroes, just like tiny RPG wizards. Final Fantasy kept evolving. 13 went super sleek and a little linear, while 14 crashed and burned, but then rose like a phoenix as one of the world's best MMOs. 15 was an epic road trip with the boys, and 16 dove into dark, dramatic fantasy, while always delivering jaw-dropping battles. Along the way, we got spin-offs, rhythm games, movies, and enough chocobo plushes to fill a castle. Final Fantasy's influence is everywhere, inspiring other games and generations of dreamers. The series has sold over 173 million copies worldwide and shows no sign of slowing down. From the gamble of the first game to the dazzling spectacle of the latest, Final Fantasy is a story of resilience, imagination, and the power of dreams. But that's the story of the game. What about the fans? Thanks to social media and the Final Fantasy community, I connected with over 20 people who joined my journey to share their passion for the game. Together, they echoed Tidus's famous line from Final Fantasy X, "Listen to my story." So I wanted to start the documentary by talking about Final Fantasy. Although this documentary is about my journey into Magic the Gathering, the fact is, like I said, Magic and Final Fantasy, I wouldn't be here playing Magic the Gathering if it wasn't for my love of Final Fantasy. So because that was my starting point into Magic, I figured why not let this be the starting point of my documentary. So I posted a video on TikTok and was overwhelmed by the amount of responses I got. All I asked was if there was any Final Fantasy fans out there who'd be willing to let me interview them for a documentary I'm working on. And I literally had hundreds of messages come through. I was so overwhelmed and so excited, but then something really caught my attention. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that you don't get a collaboration like this with Magic and Final Fantasy without there being something special and really tied into people's lives that really impacted them on a larger scale. Final Fantasy VII for me, that was my introduction to Final Fantasy. And I started playing it. It was the first video game after my dad had passed away when I was a kid. I was 11 years old, and I got lost in the world of Midgar, and more specifically with the characters like Cloud and Tifa and Aerith. And it really, as a kid, got me through a lot of difficult times because it was an escape from what was really going on. And if you've played Final Fantasy VII, you know that there's a lot of notes there about death and acceptance. And it was that game as a kid that, one, not only got me through the death of my dad, but also really set me up for the person that I am today. Someone who loves video games, who's a big fan, obviously, but someone who expects great storytelling from its games, who expects great storytelling and narrative and character-driven story arcs when he plays games. My favorite game of all time is The Last of Us. And I gotta be honest, I don't think you get that kind of game without the setup that Final Fantasy made and how deep it got with its storylines to be able to deliver a great narrative story, but to raise the expectation and the bars that we have for what gaming should look like. So I set out on this journey and I interviewed over 20 people to really talk to them about Final Fantasy. Several of them shared some amazing stories about how it really impacted their lives and how they wouldn't be the person they were today because of Final Fantasy. And in this part of the documentary, it'll arc over a couple of episodes talking about Final Fantasy because there's so much here to dive into. But I think when you look at the best collaboration and the largest collaboration that Magic has ever had with Final Fantasy, I think you're going to start seeing why it was so big and so important to so many people. So, join me as we go through and we meet some amazing people and they start talking to us about what they loved in their introduction into Final Fantasy. So talk to me about your entry point into Final Fantasy. What was your first game you played?
So the first game I played, I'm gonna do like that because I watched my dad play the games originally. Growing up, he never finished them. He's like, I'm bored already. Whatever. On to the next game. But I watched him play 7 first. And that was really special to me because my dad's a big gamer. I'm a big gamer. So I think that is my alarm. I'm so sorry. um, but I watched them play a lot of it and I was always enamored with it. I never understood it because I was so young, but I
Yeah.
was like, man, like this is really cool. And then he played 8, he played 10, and then history kind of stopped. But growing up, that's what I watched. He played a lot of games. It's Final Fantasy something that was always stuck with me because the characters look really cool. The story, although I never understood it, it was just something that I was just drawn to. I wanted to know more, but I was too young to really understand. So as I got older, I was like, well, I'm old enough now to actually understand the concept of the game, like the RPG, how to play it, like it's kind of like you have to really think about everything as you play. You can't just like button mash and go. You have to really actually think about, I'm going to cast a spell. Am I going to cure? Am I going to protect? Do whatever. So it's something that as I got older, I learned to appreciate because you also need a lot of patience for Final Fantasy. And that's something my dad didn't have, but I grew to have because I'm like, well, I'm gonna finish this game, but I can't just rush through it. I want to be able to soak in the story, soak in the characters, because Final Fantasy isn't a series that you can just rush through and call it a day.
So funny. So my first like ever like glimpse into Final Fantasy, I'll never forget. It was PlayStation 1. It was Final Fantasy 7. It wasn't me actually playing. I was born in 91, so when Final Fantasy 7 came out, I was like 6 years old.
Yeah.
But I remember we were hanging around, like my cousins and stuff, playing around outside, and we had to go in because it started raining. And my older cousin Willie, I don't know if he's gonna watch this, but if he does, shout out to you. He was playing a game, and I'll never forget. It was the part in Final Fantasy 7 where you first go to Nibelheim with Cloud, and you get to use Sephiroth, and he just
Yeah.
one shots the dragon. And I was like, what is this game? Like, this looks crazy. But I was still really young. So that was like my first, like, I guess, experience with Final Fantasy. Like, it piqued my interest because it was very different from the games that I was playing. I mean, I was a lot younger, so I was playing like stuff like Pokemon, like Sonic the Hedgehog on the Genesis, like stuff like that. I wasn't really like um I wasn't really like familiar with what JRPGs were, but that was like my first real taste of it. And then from there, I guess it kind of just spiraled off and became what it is now. So
I love that. So, now that you're an adult and you have played probably a handful of different Final Fantasy games, what continues to draw you back to the franchise?
um so I consider myself a gamer, but my favorite type of games are single player, like heavy narrative driven games. Like I love sitting down and playing a game that has like a really good story and like a world that you could dive into and like become a part of. Like I understand like online gaming and battle passes and like microtransactions is like the way gaming is right now, especially for like a younger generation. And those games have merit too. Like I like to play Call of Duty and Fortnite from time to time, but for me, it's sitting down and like playing a really like well written story, and like I can't really get enough of it. And I guess now too, like my favorite genre of game is like the RPG. I do like the old school like turn based style RPGs, but I have become accustomed to like the action RPG, like with Kingdom Hearts and like the Final Fantasy 7 remake and stuff like that. But um yeah, now with like the way technology is now, and like I feel like there's not a lot of really well made games anymore. I just recently started playing Clear Obscure Expedition 33, and
Yeah.
that is just right now I'm just like, whoa, like this is incredible. But I really enjoy like very well written stories, like almost like a movie that you're playing through. I love film. I grew up watching a lot of movies as a kid. I love stories and like relating myself to the characters and trying to put myself in their shoes, and I get very attached to stuff very quickly. And to me, that's what resonates with me is just like the experience of kind of putting yourself in their shoes and like walking through that journey with them. So that's what I enjoy as part of it.
Let's start with your first experience with Final Fantasy. What was your entry into the franchise?
So, to start off, my first, like, I remember at 3 years old, my dad had bought a Super Nintendo and they were playing, A Link to the Past or whatever. So I've kind of been like, you know, introduced to the world of gaming at a very young age. And then when I was like 6 years old, my aunt, so, I'm Asian and my aunt, she's Asian too. And, she, was playing Final Fantasy 7 and I would watch her, and I don't, I probably didn't understand anything going on, but something like drew me to that. And like that's, as I started to get older, I would say maybe I was probably like maybe between 7 and 10. That's Final Fantasy 9 was something that I just that was my first I played independently, I feel like I'm sure I played 7 or whatever, but I just have strong memories of Final Fantasy 9 being the one that I was like obsessed with, and I just like played over and over and over. And at that age I didn't even have like my own personal consoles. They were my sister's, and she was really big into that. And so like, I would just get to play whenever she wasn't on, so gosh, some of those Final Fantasies, like Final Fantasy 9, I have probably played over and over. Like, I can't even begin to tell you. So basically, that era, 7, 8, and 9, were like what I really screw up really young playing.
I love that. I for a lot of people, 9 is thought to be the best of the franchise. And it just came up on its 25th
Yes.
anniversary, right? Ironically, it's one of the few that I haven't played.
Oh, well,
So
that's something, I mean, I tell, it's kind of different. It's hard in this generation for, because games are so modern. People are like, I've never played Final Fantasy. Where do I start? Uh, I don't normally suggest those as their first one, just because like some people can be just immediately turned off for it being a product of its time as a retro game. But for people who like maybe you like you play Final Fantasy but you haven't played 9 yet, I feel like it is the perfect quintessential Final Fantasy game. Like it has it's kind of that Renaissance theme, but the themes in it are like light but adult at the same time. I feel like compared to like maybe like 10, I feel like 10 was pretty heavy, as far as like the themes and stuff. But like 9, it had a great cast. I feel like it has one of the great, I mean, we have Vivi the Black Mage. I mean, he's just the best black mage. I have this little guy right here. Everyone compliments. I love him so much. But yeah, no, I just feel like Final Fantasy overall, just that is peak Final Fantasy right there. And I know you said 7 was your first, and a lot of people I feel like their favorite Final Fantasy is their first one. So that could be play into it as well.
My first experience would have to be when my father got tired of me finishing games in a weekend. He would buy me like 2 or 3 new games every weekend, and he just got sick of it. He's like, you know what? I'm sick of this. Here, borrow this. And he let me borrow, I think it was Final Fantasy Mystic Quest on the Super Nintendo.
Okay.
Great soundtrack, by the way. I think it was like one of the easier Final Fantasies, I remember, because you could only have 2 party members. But I started playing it. I was like, oh, it's so much reading. Mind you, I was like 10 or 12 at the time. But it hooked me in. I just wanted to know what happened next. I wanted to like get through the story. And I got to the end of the game, but my nephew deleted my save file. So I never got to finish it. Fast forward a couple years, he said, hey, you know what? Here, borrow this. There's Final Fantasy 7. I'm like, okay. Took me 2 years to finish that game. Because I was so confused. I had no idea what to do. Yeah. I have so many memories of it. And like I would call him like, hey, I don't know what to do here. What do I do? I don't know if Cloud should have this. I don't know if Barrett should have that. Well, should I keep Tifa in my party? Why did Aerith die? Like,
yeah,
all kinds of things, you know what I mean? So, well, can I use a Phoenix down at least? No, she's gone. Okay, but yeah, he entered. That's one thing I can definitely thank him for, is him introducing me to the Final Fantasy franchise and RPGs in general.
So my intro into Final Fantasy was kind of a left field introduction. I was at my cousin's house and they had games that I didn't have for the PlayStation 2 at the time. And they had this one game where it had like 3 girls on the cover. And I was like, I never see like 3 like women being like the superheroes of a game. So I was like, yeah, let me try that one. And I absolutely loved it because how often do you see like the main playable characters being all women? Like that is so cool.
I'm
So
assuming that was Final Fantasy X-2, the sequel.
yep, the one everyone hates. Yes.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never played it. We'll get into why I haven't played it here in a second.
It's very girly. I understand.
So that was your entry point. Okay, I love it. So so was it the cover art that got you? Was it just the obviously the characters on the cover, but did you play the game?
Yeah, so I when I was at their house, I played it like the first I don't know, hour or so. So I'm on Mount Gagazet and I'm like rushing up to the top to get I mean you haven't played the game, I guess, but I'm assuming like
Oh yeah.
So you just see you're like doing the tutorial essentially, learning how they move and learning how to like have Yuna jump across segments where the land is missing and whatever. And then I had to go home, but I did end up getting 10 and 10-2 for my PS2. And then I didn't play 10 immediately. I played 10-2 right off the bat though, because that one is one that got me. And I had no idea what I was even trying to do. Obviously, I didn't 100% it, so I didn't get the perfect ending, and but I did play 10 at a later time because I did have the PS2 for a long time, and I think that was probably my favorite gaming system. It just had so many good games, and a lot of them weren't even remade for other platforms or other newer versions of the PlayStation, which was really unfortunate. But I did play 10 when my parents were starting to go through their divorce. Because I would hide in the basement a lot, and that's where we had our PlayStation. And I ended up playing that, and it was just a great escape. And then I played 10 and then 10-2 right after, so I actually understood versus just like having like 3 girl heroes, like super fun, like girls trip where we unlock the outfits. I actually understood more with it, and Yuna's being jealous and like getting the perfect ending. I did 100% it. I did have to follow a guide to get it. But my introduction to Final Fantasy was 10 and 10-2.
Funnily enough, for me, it was Final Fantasy 14. I had a couple of friends that really wanted me to get into like an MMO, and they wanted to play together for a while. And 14 happened to be about to come out with the Shadowbringers DLC, and so my friends got me in, and within a month, we had blown through the game to prepare for that new DLC that was about to drop. And since then, it's been so cool to kind of connect with new people, to strengthen the bonds of the friendships I already had, to bring in some of my other friends into the game with us. And 14 also seems like it's a nice homage to all of Final Fantasy because it has the ability to pull from other games and put it into their world without breaking the canon, right?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And you kind of hit the nail on the head with what this whole series is about, and that's talking about the community aspect of it and kind of bringing people together. I don't know if there's been another collab within the video game genre versus like the trading card game genre that has brought so many people together like Final Fantasy and Magic has. And so for you said you've been playing Magic for about 10 plus years. When you look at this Final Fantasy collab and you see how many new people it brought in, like, why do you think it's been so big?
It's an interesting combination of the fact that like Final Fantasy as an IP itself is so big, and Magic has been going on for 30 plus years at this point as well. So you have a card game that has at least some grounds to it. It's not a new card game that's popping up with new rules that people have to learn. You have actually have players that are experienced that can show, newer players the ropes and things and explain how the mechanics in the game work. Plus the flavorfulness of what they did with this set specifically. A lot of these cards really relate to how the characters were portrayed in the games of Final Fantasy games and how mechanics work in there. There's a lot of flavor to the set that people love, plus the artwork. They were able to actually pull artists from Square Enix to like do the artworks for some of these cards, and I think that drew a lot of people in as well. As holy crap, they're actually grabbing Square Enix artists and I would butcher their name if I tried to actually say some of them, but there's some really nice artists out there that they brought in. I know everyone was going crazy with that, so that was a huge part. And then even some of the Through the Ages cards that they put in there with the screenshots from the games, a lot of people can look at that and go, "Oh, I remember that when I played that. That was really cool that they put that on a card." Right?
So I started. I will say I was kind of privileged. I started with 6, honestly, and that was a pretty cool experience when it came out on the SNES. Honestly, it's what brought me into the JRPG genre in general and made me go back to play some of the other ones. And I fell in love with it because of the story and the way that the characters interact with each other, and just everything about that game drew me in so quick and so concise that I had to finish it
Yeah.
because it's iconic for a reason.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and I think that um, what I love about Final Fantasy and what I think so for me, I'll give you a little bit of, I guess, like personal insight on me. Final Fantasy VII was my first introduction to the franchise,
Sure,
and
most people it happens
yeah.
to be the case. So,
but for me, it came. I was I don't know. I was what, maybe 11, 10, 11 years old, and when it came out, it was the first game that I played after I lost my dad. And it was about immersing myself in a
Right.
world that wasn't my own, right? And I think what Final Fantasy does so well is it draws us in and gives us. I hesitate to use the word escape, but it really is. It's an escape to another
Yeah.
world, that we just can't, like, to your point, you just couldn't get enough of. You just wanted to spend more and more time there, and so
That's
um
definitely the case.
so give me an idea. You said Final Fantasy VI was your introduction. What was it about? Was there any character specifically that you were drawn to? Was it the storyline? Like, what got you hooked specifically?
Honestly, this might be a cop-out answer, but like everything about that game is great. The
Yeah.
story in that game, to me personally, I don't think it's been met. I think it's the best of all time, of any game entirely. I do like 7 a lot. I still think 6 takes it for me specifically. And just there's tons of characters, but if I had to pick like a couple, the villain Kefka, he's iconic. He's unhinged. He just does what he wants and kind of just gets away with it. And
I
like
I don't think you get a Sephiroth without Kepka. Like,
no, you definitely don't.
Yeah.
Kefka is definitely that template to have it there. But I mean, he's just all over the place. He's completely unhinged as a character. And Tara's journey throughout that entire thing where she's trying to find herself in between trying to figure out who she is as a person. I just love everything about that because there's so much loss and despair that happens through 6 that you're just like, what is going on? Like, how are we letting this unhinged person getting away with this? And it definitely tugs on that perspective. Ironically, I do really like Kafka a lot as a villain. He is so unhinged and crazy.
My first one was Final Fantasy One, the old 8-bit NES cartridge. I remember playing it at a friend of mine's house, like for hours and hours and hours. Like I was spending the night at his house, and we had a little system set up because I like the exploring and the regular, I guess, farming XP and gold. And he was a lot better at me than for boss battles because a lot of times in Final Fantasy, you've got to plan that out. You can't just go in and nuke everybody, and that's always been my way to play it. Kill them all, let God sort them out. But so we had a really cool. I'd go around until we got to a boss, and all right, here you go, it's on you. And we ended up beating the game that night. And I still remember everything about it. That was what, 86 or 87.
Yeah.
I don't remember dinner last night, but I can remember that.
I
I remember
love that.
I remember the names of the characters that we came up with for our, and even to this day, if there's like, oh, hey, enter your character's name in. If it's 4 characters, I'm still using that same name.
I love that. I love that.
When I was young, my dad was in the military. We lived in Junction City, Kansas, and he had a person that he talked to a lot. His nickname was Baloo. And for one of my birthdays, my dad brought me home a Super Nintendo with, I think, 2 games. One of them was Super Mario, and the other one was Final Fantasy. Now, I tried to play that when I was young, and he had already completed a file. So
Yeah.
I had to erase everything to start over. And I had no instructions. They didn't come with the boxes of the booklets. So I got confused really quick, like what I'm supposed to do, how it's supposed to work. And not a lot of people know this, but Final Fantasy Mystic Quest was designed in Japan as a beginner's Final Fantasy.
I didn't know that.
It's kind of funny because Americans were complaining from Final Fantasy 1 to, onward that they were too hard in question marks. So Japan had the bright idea to, okay, well, if they think it's too hard, let's give them a beginner's Final Fantasy. And Final Fantasy Mystic Quest has been viewed and panned by a lot of people, but it's also been part of a lot of childhoods. So it just depends on which side of the road you grew up on.
All right, man. I just want to thank you again for taking time to be able to chat with me. You and I go a long ways back.
We do.
And I know that, man, we really kind of bonded over our love for Final Fantasy. And so I remember working with you and just a lot of late nights at the restaurant just chatting about Final Fantasy and the love of it and the lore. So I really look forward to this conversation with you. So
Sweet.
Walk me through, man. What was your first experience with Final Fantasy?
I'm older than most gamers.
Yeah.
I was there when the first game came out.
Okay.
And so, there was a couple of games like it, but nothing like Final Fantasy when it came out. And just turning it on, and the first time you hear the little weird music, you knew that it was going to be something exciting.
I love that. I think we both have a huge love for Final Fantasy VII.
Yes.
And, that was my first introduction to the game. And in fact, you'll get a kick out of this. I was playing it, the remake and Rebirth, and the little chime at the end of a victory, the dun 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 dun.
Yeah, the whole music.
My little boy was continuing to sing that every single time a victory came up, which I thought was pretty cool.
Probably the most iconic sound from the Final Fantasy series is the winning sounds when you won a match in Final Fantasy VII.
It is. Especially whenever you fought so hard. If it was a boss that you really struggled to beat, and then all of a sudden you hear that victory tune.
Yeah,
it's a sense of fulfillment that's unlike any other.
My entry to it was a wonderful place that no longer exists called Blockbuster.
Perfect.
I stumbled across a very interesting PlayStation game. I had a cool guy with long brown hair and a leather jacket on, and it said Final Fantasy VIII, and I had no idea what that meant. So I immediately grabbed it, and I ran over to my grandmother, and I was like, hey, what's the VIII thing? And she explained to me that it's Roman numerals. And I was like, cool, that sounds cool. I need to play this game. So she rented it out for me, and I made it to the end of the first disc, and I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing anymore.
I love that. What's funny is, the moment you start talking about, guy with long brown hair and a leather jacket, you just instantly know it's going to be Squall, right? These characters are so iconic. And I think a lot of it has to do with the art design. I mean, the artwork, not only with the game itself, but the cover arts that you get with the game and things like that, is such a representation, I think, of the genre of Final Fantasy itself. It's at its core, it's an artistic endeavor for each individual video game, because each one has its own unique storyline. Each one has its own unique set of characters, and I just love the fact that you literally get to rebuild this world every single time through every single game. So Final Fantasy VIII was your entry point. Is that your favorite game of the series?
From a nostalgic sake and just for the characters, the design, and like it being the first one, yes. But if we're going to say like the one that I can always find myself going back to time and time again, it's Final Fantasy X.
Yeah, I love Final Fantasy X. So what draws you most about that game? What keeps you coming back to that world of Spear?
It's the fact that it feels like there's still more to the story, and Titus or Titus, however you want to say
Yeah,
it, his introduction of like this is my story, these are my words, and you get everything with his backstory, his family, everything that he deals with, and you focus on this character, and then you realize that he's really not the main character.
yeah,
He's a stepping stone.
My first experience was, I think I was about 9 years old, and my sister took me to Electronics Boutique, which was in all the malls, of course, in the 90s. And I picked up this used game that had really pretty graphics on the back, and took it home and was really disappointed when I loaded it up and it was pixelated. And up until that point, I had only played Spyro and it had voice acting. So then, of course,
yeah.
I also realized I had to read. um, so initially it was a big learning curve for me, and people who've played Final Fantasy VIII know that a big contention point is the junction system.
Mhm.
Once you're an adult, it's a lot more fun and easy to play, but as a child, it made you want to throw your controller.
Very much.
Yeah, it took me about a couple years to work through, but eventually I beat it and grew to love it. So eventually, when I was watching Dragon Ball Z on Toonami, when I was, I guess I was about 11 or 12, I saw the Final Fantasy X promo, and there was voice acting and this beautiful music and stuff. And I was, damn, I have to have that, which meant getting a new system and everything else. And I used to cut out the video games and stuff from the Sears Christmas catalog and paste
I
it
love
on a
it.
piece of paper. Yeah. Um, so I was blessed enough that my dad actually did get that for me for Christmas, and that was my second Final Fantasy game. But I love Final Fantasy VIII is my origin story with Final Fantasy, but Final Fantasy X is my the one that I hold closest to my heart.
My first experience with Final Fantasy was Final Fantasy VIII. So I was a little kind of already late into the game. But thinking about when Final Fantasy VIII came out, I was still relatively young. I was kind of, I want to say I had to have been like 9, 10 years old. But it was seeing my cousins play it. Like they were really the ones who kind of got me into it. So I would always be at their house. I came over and they were playing Final Fantasy VIII, and I was like just hooked, like watching them play it the whole time. And they let me borrow it from there on. And I went Final Fantasy VIII, then went back to 7 because of how popular it was. Um, and then just been playing since there on. I think the one before, earlier than 7 that I played was 6. And I think
Okay.
that's as early as I've gotten into it.
Okay, nice. So when you played Final Fantasy VIII for the first time, was there any characters in particular that you were kind of drawn to? Was it like Squall, or like what kind of hooked you the most about the characters in the game?
Um, probably with being that young, I was really kind of drawn towards Cypher just because at that time I was like a big Vegeta fan for Dragon Ball Z too. So like I was always like that. I always liked that character that wasn't the main character, but like had the same kind of power level. But now that I'm looking at it a little bit older, I would still have. I really like. I want to say I don't want to butcher his name, but Irvine. I believe I remember his. Yeah, I like that guy too.
The American version of Final Fantasy IV, which would have been Final Fantasy II. It would have been 1992 when I got it. So it was, of course, like a flagship game for the Super Nintendo. But we didn't actually get a Super Nintendo until probably like a year after it came out. And when we first played it in my house, so I say we because it was me and my siblings sharing the experience. We had rented it, and it was one of these things where my sister grabbed the box, and something about that very understated design for the packaging for early Final Fantasies. It just has like an iconic look. Something about it just seemed very. She would not put the box down. We actually didn't want to rent it that day, and she got her way. So she got her way because the person who worked at the game rental store was like, please rent this game. No, you have to. And just telling us all these things, which looking back, realized a lot of spoilers came out in that conversation where he was just telling us this is what happened. And like, it's an amazing game. So we took it home, and I would have been like 10 years old. My sister would have been 8. So like it was a rental copy of the game, right? So there's already files on it, including an end game file. So like kids are going to do, like, we were more interested in just seeing what the game was. We didn't start a new file. We jumped right into that end game file and started running around in the final dungeon in the first like 10 minutes of playing it. And if you remember in Final Fantasy IV, that final dungeon is in the core of the moon. It has a very distinct, very kind of otherworldly look to it. And it was like very much like the Dark Crystal, Jim Henson's The Dark Crystal, very surreal and otherworldly and ethereal. And that music, and not knowing anything we were doing, just wandering into random encounters and dying, just being like, whoa, okay, this is, huh. And then, like, not even knowing who the characters were, just kind of figuring them out. I remember the first time we figured out what the summon command did, and summoning something with Rydia, and being like, oh, she just made that. Oh, that was really cool. Wow, okay. And then over the course of that weekend, kind of starting a file, seeing that opening screen, and being like, okay, this is it. I remember feeling a lot of it at the time. It very much reminded me of like Jim Henson's The Dark Crystal. It had this sort of like otherworldly quality where it was like fantasy stories from books, but not quite. There was something else to it. There was a little kind of like a fudge ripple of something else through it, which I didn't learn until later, was the fact that Final Fantasy has like a science fantasy element to it most of the time. There's something kind of not really sci-fi, but unusual, like Magitech, or like the lunar subterranean. There's always something technological that's in contrast to that fantasy, and you don't really see that a lot in that era, right? That was a little bit unusual for that, and it creates kind of a very distinct feel that makes it feel somehow like in that like that very, very rapidly evolving technological era of the 90s and 2000s. There's a familiarity there, but then there's this very surreal, otherworldly feel that, honestly, too, like the Amano artwork and the Amano character designs, like that really was very resonant. So we kept renting it because our parents wouldn't let us buy it. So we kept renting it, and we would rent it all the time, and we were slowly working our way through the game. And then I found a copy of Final Fantasy I in a discount bin for like $10 and used my allowance and bought it. And we were like, oh, okay, like we're really getting into this franchise. And then Final Fantasy III, which would have been the Japanese or the American release of Final Fantasy VI, came out. And at that point, it was just like, it was over. Like we were fully invested, and it's just been one of those franchises that me and my family have kind of followed pretty closely since then. It's always been one of our big releases. And then when 7 came out, obviously it just blew up, and like then everyone knew what it was.
Actually, back in the early 90s, back when Final Fantasy IV was still called 2.
Nice.
I used to watch my uncle play all the time, and then I would try to play it, but I was about 3 or 4,
Hmm.
so I didn't care for reading anything. I just would like to run around the castle and stuff. And I was obsessed with Kane. So
Mm,
much so that as a little kid, I would put a giant pillow on my head so that it looked like the dragon helmet that he wears.
that's awesome.
That was my first experience.
I love that. I have a 4-year-old little boy right now who just finished watching me replay Final Fantasy X, and he I started noticing that while he was playing in the living room and I would be playing the game, he would start humming the victory tune every time I'd win a battle. And so he started asking about characters. He started throwing around his balls like it was a blitz ball, like Waka, like it was kind of cool. So I love that. Well,
Funny
tell
you
me,
say
like,
that. I've got a 4-year-old, and I'm currently playing 10-2 right now.
are you really? What do you think of it so far?
You know what? I don't care what anybody says. I like 10-2.
Yeah.
I really do. I think it's a nice, uh, happy comparison to the kind of downer story of 10.
First experience that I can remember, most people around my age, late 30s, early 40s, that kind of age group were Final Fantasy VII was their first kind of foray into it. That's what drew everybody in. It's probably the most iconic of all the Final Fantasy games. But for me, it was actually 8. I kind of bypassed 7 and jumped straight into 8. And it was just the draw of the uniqueness of that game, the gun blades. Like, I mean, how much more like just wild of a fantasy weapon can you get than a gun blade? And I can remember my very first time ever using like a Game Genie, Game Shark type cheat tool on a game was actually after I finished my first playthrough on 8. I went back through and played it again. But I turned on a cheat to give me a genie lamp for one of the summons at the very beginning of the game and couldn't do enough damage to actually defeat the boss. No, regardless of whether or not I had, infinite health, infinite damage, like there was no possible way to actually defeat the summon and get it at that point in the game. So so I completely burned my game at that point and had to start over again and was like, this may not be a good idea for this one. But 8 coming in with Squall and the Gunblade was my first introduction to Final Fantasy.
It was Final Fantasy 3.
Okay.
But back then I didn't actually know it's Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
So older. I guess if you want to call it a true entry point, was PlayStation 1 was the Pizza Hut demo discs they used to give out. Final Fantasy 8 was on them, and it had a random mission where you fought the Spider Ballista with a random team of characters that wasn't actually how the game played out.
Yeah.
That's probably the first one that I remember actually being Final Fantasy. But I remember playing Final Fantasy 3 back on Super Nintendo back when I was much younger.
So, whenever you were first started playing Final Fantasy, was there something in particular that kind of drew you to the game? Like, what helped you kind of stick around Final Fantasy?
For me, I've always liked fantasy aspects, books, games, movies, everything in that regard. But I hadn't played an RPG much. Like I said, I went from games like Super Mario World to playing an RPG style game, Final Fantasy 3 on Super Nintendo, and that's where I started just loving the RPG style games.
Yeah,
because it's story driven, it's immersive. You actually like are playing through the whole story. So it's like watching a movie or reading a book, but you're actually controlling everything that happens.
I want to say was 8. The first thing I really remember about Final Fantasy is my brother playing 8 and sitting and watching him play it. And he's one of those guys who will sit and get as broken as you can in as quickly as possible. And so I would just sit there and watch him. And then when I finally got to play it myself, just the opening for that, the opening cinematic on it, was probably one of the greatest things I'd seen at that point.
It definitely revolutionized.
And the music.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say that opening sequence definitely revolutionized like graphics at the time. Like that was the opening cutscene with Squall fighting. Like it was unreal. I didn't see it, never saw anything like it. In that game, and so, and you're right, the music was extremely awesome. So, is that your favorite Final Fantasy game? 8?
No, 12 is actually my favorite, which everyone is surprised about because everyone seems to really hate 12 for whatever reason. But I love 12. Like, it has some of my fondest memories of just playing through, and specifically in the Tomb of Wraithwall, going through, like, figuring out how do I deal with this demon wall. Like, you got 2 demon walls here. One of them you have to fight. The other one is optional. I'm like, okay, but I don't want to just leave this boss. And so, like, finding out how to beat that, and then discovering like the secret like hallways and stuff inside that inside the tomb, I'm like, okay, this is phenomenal. That was like when I'm really like, yep, this is my favorite game right here.
All right, this is actually very easy for me. So even as a small child, I would watch my older sister and mother play Final Fantasy, such as Final Fantasy 2 and Final Fantasy 7. I remember on Christmas one year, my grandmother bought my mother Final Fantasy 7 for Christmas, and the biggest scream I've ever heard happened. And so I was always intrigued because I've always looked up to my mother and my big sister. And then around my 4th birthday, September 9th of 1999, Final Fantasy 8 came out. And I can remember this even as a little 4-year-old. I was begging my mother because I wanted to play it because I know of Final Fantasy. I've grown up with it. I wanted to play it. So my mother got it for me. Final Fantasy, I have learned to read because I was so enthralled in the world. I wanted to be like my big sister and my mother. So I was enthralled with the world, and I started with Final Fantasy 8. And I have grown up with the series as Square Enix, or Squaresoft at the time, grew. I grew with it.
I love that. I mean, it was a similar story to me. I'm a few years older than you are, but I remember even as a kid like playing Final Fantasy 7 for the first time, and I actually I had a reading disability. I mean, I still do. I'm not dyslexic, but I have really poor reading comprehension, so I have to read something like over and over again to get it. And I remember it was really difficult for me to follow along with the storyline, but it was really good for me growing up because I needed that practice, right? I needed to be able to read that dialogue and get immersed in it. So I love the fact that you grew up with this series and this franchise, and I love the fact that you can contribute your growth as a person to it. Like that's amazing. So,
oh yeah,
do you have a favorite game?
I have Final Fantasy 8, the one I started with. Even though I'm not going to cause me to fail a spelling test because I always thought C sounds should start with a K. Thank you for that, Ultimecia. But Final Fantasy 8 has always been one of my favorites. It kind of gives me a Wizard of Oz vibes. Like, we have the soldier walking the road trying to beat the evil witch. I've just always been enthralled with Ultimecia, Renoa, Squall.
Yeah.
I will have to say a close second is Final Fantasy X. The story on that is just absolutely stunning and gorgeous.
So Final Fantasy was an interesting experience, really. Probably different than most people. I would like to say my first real game that I kind of dove into is 7. But I did have a little bit of experience with, at the time, 2 and 3, as you know, but it's been 5 and 6 now. Kind of that Final Fantasy 7 was the first gift I got, and it's a funny story because dad got it for me for Christmas, and I went to open it, and I'm like, wait a minute, this game's already been opened and played.
Wow.
So my dad ended up kind of busting it open a little bit before Christmas and played a little bit of it.
That's hilarious.
Because he was big into RPGs back then too. Super Nintendo, Nintendo games. I was a little too young to really get into, 5 and 6 or 2 and 3, depends how you look at it, when they first came out. But that's kind of where it started. 7, then I moved back and played 2 and 3 and kind of went forward from there.
Awesome. Well, let's talk about 7 for a minute, because that was also my entry into Final Fantasy. And I think for a lot of people, it's not only their entry into it, but it's kind of their favorite Final Fantasy game of the franchise. It clearly is the one that has the most popularity from the aspect of like the remakes, and then the movie and all the additional content that's come out around it. It's probably the most popular one in those characters. Is there a character in Final Fantasy VII that kind of speaks to you the most, that you relate to, or that you like the most?
I would say Vincent. I've always liked Vincent's character. Even though early on the adaptation of Final Fantasy VII, the first Polygon make, he didn't have a lot of character design. It took a lot of optional direction to really get his character design.
Yeah.
But I really liked the actual character himself, and then once you kind of learn his backstory, kind of brings him full force. You know what I'm saying? So that was always been my favorite. Even today, it's still kind of my favorite. I did a lot of artwork of him and things like that. So
this one is first entry point was Final Fantasy VII. My dad is a big fan of Final Fantasy VII. He's what got me into the series, and that was like one of the first games I can ever remember growing up. Was that one specifically? And that was one of those ones I wanted to play because, big dude, giant cool sword, another man turned into monsters. It's like, hell yeah, I want to get into this. I was like 4 or 5 years old. And so then I started to get, and that was one that got me into it because whenever I first played it, I was 7 years old. I knew everything that was going on, but it was just one of those like weird experiences. It was like, as a little child, it's like, I finally get to do this. My character, Cloud, is going to be called something stupid like Vent, and Barrett over there, that's Zoxman. Who knows what these characters are going to be called? This is my world. And I absolutely loved my first experience because it was just my own true experience with it that I got to see and finally experience.
I love that. Final Fantasy VII was my entry point to the game as well, and to this day, I still think the Buster Sword's the most badass weapon there is. So I am partial. I do like Sephiroth's sword as well. I like the long blade, but I don't know, man. I have a replica Buster Sword myself. I love it. So
I'm needing to get, because I see it on Amazon for like $200. I think the fusion sword from the Advent Children movie is infinitely cooler than that. This is cool, but the fusion sword is so. I want a metal one because I don't know if you saw my thing where I got the 20-pound World of Warcraft sword. If it's not big and bulky, I don't want it. I want that massive hunk of metal.
The first one I can really remember playing, I think I did a little bit of time in Final Fantasy III, which is technically 6, right? I think that was the first one that I can really recall, but I wasn't very good at it, and I don't remember playing much of it, to be honest. The moment that really stands out to me, that like got its hooks into me as far as Final Fantasy is concerned, is that moment in Final Fantasy VII where you first hear the boo, 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 and they go through, the city of Midgar, and they take you on this sweeping tour, and you see Aerith for the first time. That you don't know who she is at the time. I was over at not even a friend's house. It was like a family friend's house. And they had just recently picked up a PlayStation 1 and Final Fantasy VII. And he was playing that when I went over there to hang out. My dad was doing some stuff over there. And I remember seeing the opening of this game, and I was like, what is this? Because I had played 3D games a little bit, but most of my experience had been in the 16-bit, the 8-bit, a little bit of the 32-bit, right? But like this new technology, this PlayStation, was brand new at the time, and I could not believe what I was seeing, right? And that's the first moment that I think I was like, what is this game called? Oh, Final Fantasy? Oh, I've heard of that, And I had friends who had played Final Fantasy 1 and Final Fantasy 2, and we talked about it, but it never really had, like, sunk its hooks into me until 7 came out.
Some really awesome stories about people's first interaction with Final Fantasy. First, let me just thank everybody who was participating in this documentary. I honestly, because of you guys and the inspiration that you provided with your stories led me to continue this documentary and to be where we're at now. So again, I just want to thank you. As we continue the docuseries, we'll delve into more of their stories, and the first few episodes of this docuseries will be about Final Fantasy, but it's not just going to be about the introduction. It's going to be about their journey through the games and ultimately what led a lot of us into Magic the Gathering. So this docuseries will air the first and third Tuesday of every month, so make sure to come back in 2 weeks and join me for episode 2. Thank you, guys.